Hey, what up though? What up though? YouTube, what's good? It's Payday Boxing, man. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Look, I just wanted to touch on a quick topic, man. It's something that people have been talking about in boxing, but it's something I wanted to break down too. I mean, kind of give you guys my perspective and why I don't think there actually are any champions in boxing. Now, there's guys who may appear to be champions or look like they're champions, but there aren't any real champions in boxing. I'm gonna explain why, in my opinion, there aren't any real champions in boxing. And basically, it's because of the belts. You know, we've heard this the talk about, are there too many belts in boxing? Are there too many belts in boxing? Well, in my opinion, there definitely are too many belts in boxing. And let me explain why I think there's too many belts in boxing, what I think, and why that's a problem. So for this reason, so take any other sport you know, any other sport, doesn't matter what it is. How many champions are there in that sport? There's one. Okay, there's one champion. Now, there's college football where they have all these bowl games and all this other whoop-de-whoop, but at the end of the day, there's one champion. There's one champion. Basketball, there's one champion. There's the East and West Conference. You have divisions within the East and West, but ultimately, there's one champion. In football, same thing. You have the AFC, you have the NFC, but ultimately, there's one Super Bowl winner. There's one champion, you know, at the end of the day. So, when I see in boxing, you have 4 different titles. Now, to me, number one, what happens when you have 4 champions, which of course that means there's no champion, you know, by fault of there being 4 champions, there is not one champion, which means there is no champion. You have a bunch of guys who have a claim to be a champion, or in my opinion, what I call intermediary titles. You know, these guys that hold these belts, in my opinion, what they are, they're the Eastern Conference champion, you know, they're the Western Conference champion, you know, they're the NFC champion, they're the AFC champion, you know, they're not the champion. You know, you cannot be the champion until you have all the belts, you know, in my opinion. You know, you cannot be the champion. So, the issue with there being 4 champions is that, number one, you water down the champion pool and you create this path and this fake aura where these guys can claim to be champions and not really be champions. You know, they can just be AFC champions. You know, at the end of the day, the Super Bowl this past year, nobody's gonna give a shit, you know, that the Kansas City Chiefs were the AFC champions. No one's gonna care next year that they're the reigning AFC champions. It doesn't matter because they didn't win the Super Bowl, so they're not the champion. And that's how I look at all these champions in boxing. That's why I think unification bouts are what we should be striving for, and that's why I think we ultimately need undisputed to get all of these excess champions out of the mix. Why is unification great? For 2 reasons. Number one, it eliminates a champion. That means we have less guys who have a claim to be a champion. And then it creates a guy who has more of a claim than some other guys to be a champion, potentially. You know, he could be the 3rd weakest champion and have beaten the 4th weakest champion, and then therefore be running from the tougher champions, which is the inherent issue with having multiple champions in a division. You create a situation where guys can target weaker champions in order to have a claim to be champion, market themselves as champion, parade around and play politics and say, I can't fight this other guy who's also a champion because I'm this or I'm that or I'm a bigger star, or whatever the case may be that these guys use as reasons to duck guys. All behind titles and belts and there being so many champions in boxing. This is why there needs to be less champions. So let's just say for example, there's only one champion in each division. Guess what that means? In order for anyone else to become a champion, you have to beat that guy. That guy. You have to be that guy. So there's no one else who can run around and say or claim to be a champion unless you've beaten that guy. You know, you don't have a bunch of different champions. You have a single champion. That to me is what a champion is. That's why I think undisputed is important, and that's why I think we need less belts in boxing. You know, now we add all these extra franchise belts and we've got regular belts and super titles and silver belts and it just gets confusing, man. So ultimately, that's why we need less belts in boxing. We need a champion. You know, ultimately, if we could get down to maybe 2 sanctioning bodies, I would settle for 2. 1 would be ideal, but if we could get down to 2, that'd be a huge change in boxing, in my opinion. Then you'd have a situation where these guys can't jump up and down divisions and pick on weak champions in order to say, hey, I won a belt in another division. You can't have these guys that go up and say, hey, I'm going to challenge, somebody for a vacant title, at this division up here and go get a belt, or challenge a weak champion, or a guy who's on his way out, or a young champion, who hasn't really learned much or done anything. So that's my opinion. That's why we need less belts in boxing. This is Payday Boxing. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Peace, y'all.